And then we'll get started here in just a few seconds. Well, I want to welcome everybody to our webinar today. We're really excited to be talking to you. We're going to be focusing today on emerging businesses. We're going to be focusing on cybersecurity in 2024. And a lot of this is going to focus on those businesses and what they need to be doing. Along with that, we're going to talk a little about our National Association of Women Business Owner relationship that Brightworks Group has. I'm Ben Meller. I'm going to be really your host today. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Brightworks Group. We're an IT consulting firm based in Indiana with national footprint and presence. We also have Doug Miller here, the CEO, founder, and owner of Brightworks Group. We'll be handling everything here for your webinar today and talking about your topic. So what we ask is for you guys is to sit back, relax. We're going to kind of cover a lot of really interesting topics that a business owner needs to know about and should know about to kind of prepare for the business. And we're going to create this very much in a talk show format for you. But also, if you do have any questions towards the end here, we'll open it up to questions. You can put the questions in the chat format here of the webinar, and we'd be happy to handle those questions for you. We're also going to record today's webinar so that we'll get this out to any of the registrants. So if there's other people that you want to pass this along to that you think is going to be fit for them as a business owner so they can be prepared for 2024 and 2025 for cybersecurity, definitely send this along the way. So that being said, let's kind of hop into this a little bit, Doug. I thought it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about the National Association of Women Business Owners and a little bit about the history of Brightworks Group on that relationship. But we may even want to talk a little about the history of Brightworks Group in general before we even get to that. Is that okay?
Sure. Well, we are we're 12 and a half years now. I started the Brightworks Group after working at a variety of a couple of different IT consulting companies, and then before that a stint as a IT executive in healthcare, particularly a hospital, and before that manufacturing and financial services, which are kind of industries that we still specialize in. A few years into our growth as Brightworks Group, we picked up a customer who happened to be not just a board member, but the president of NAWBO-Indy, and developed a really strong relationship with her. And I think one of the reasons being that our approach has always been a little bit different than a lot of other IT companies who are very, very, strongly oriented to technology. And it's not that we aren't. We're very strongly oriented towards technology, but as we talk about in our catchphrase, human-focused IT, we also are really focused on delivering that technology and helping companies in a way that helps their business and is understanding of what individuals and businesses are trying to do. And in this particular case, with this particular client, they had a prior consulting firm working with them who, for 2 years blamed a problem that this woman business owner was having on her. We solved the problem in literally less than a minute, and it was a software problem. And I think at that point, she was really sold on us. At that point, she started to refer us to other members of NAWBO. We were reaching out to organizations who happened to be NAWBO members and on the board. And eventually we ended up at a point one year where I think almost the entire board of NAWBO were customers of ours. And at that point, it made a lot of sense to look at our NAWBO relationship. I had been on a panel about cybersecurity at a NAWBO event. We were NAWBO sponsors / members. And we said, hey, let's just take this up sort of a level here, because we're doing a lot with this organization that is doing really good things in the Indianapolis community. especially for women business owners, and how can we develop a better relationship with them, a stronger relationship with them, and help support them. And that's why we're in the position today where we are a NAWBO sponsor. We do provide technology support for NAWBO. We attend NAWBO events. We sponsor NAWBO events. I think it's a really valuable organization. And as I've said at things in the past, I have a wife who's a business owner and a member of NAWBO now, and a daughter who is an IT executive, not a woman business owner, but a very strong female business executive developing her skill set. And so I think it's really critical to support these kinds of organizations throughout our community. So we're really happy to be involved with NAWBO. It's been a great relationship, and just a great bunch of people. And I really enjoy their events and everything they're doing.
That's great. And let's transition a little bit to just the topic of the business owner, and really take a look at what they need to be aware of. I mean, if you look at your average business owner, they're not thinking about IT. They're not thinking about
No,
security at all, right? They're
they're
thinking about
not.
payroll, selling, and
Yeah,
marketing, the core business. And that average small business, emerging business owner isn't thinking about this. So when we take a look at this topic of IT, it can be daunting. It can be scary to a business owner. And especially when, I even joke around, would that business owner leave their door open all night? Probably not, right? And the same thing with their data, same thing with anything having to do with IT. Let's talk a little bit about that piece of it. What are some of the things that this business owner needs to kind of think about when it comes to cybersecurity threats and some common things? What are some
sure.
common threats out there?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the first things that's really critical here is, there's a lot of stuff flying around, and you see stuff every single day about all of the problems in cybersecurity and outages and this and that. And I mean, we just saw the thing with the big CrowdStrike outage, which, ironically was not actually a cybersecurity attack, but a failure in cybersecurity software, right? And so all of that, I think, amps up the anxiety in business owners where, on the one hand, we're hearing all the time about how vulnerable we are and problems and what we could get attacked by and how people are getting our information and all these things. And then on the other hand, right, even the software that's being used by really large companies maybe isn't reliable. And I think all that creates anxiety. It's different today than it was, say, a decade ago, where, yeah, we would get a lot of pushback if we talked to companies, particularly small firms, about cybersecurity. Oh, I don't need to worry about that. I'm just a small company. Nobody's interested in my data, blah, blah, blah. And you couldn't really get them to buy into it. Today, I find that people are very, very interested. Small business, medium-sized business, large business, they're all very concerned about it, but there's a lot of misperceptions and a lot of anxiety. And so the first thing I would say is, well, you can't dismiss this, and you do need to know about cybersecurity. You need to do it from a position of making good decisions, not a position of panic and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It's I got to do something. I don't know what to do, so I'll grab onto the first thing that lands small businesses in bad places. They take cybersecurity advice that's not good advice. They go out on their own. I mean, one of the things that we see pretty regularly, and actually just happened with this CrowdStrike thing, is businesses don't know what to do, so they go out and they do some Googling and they download some software. And it turns out that the very software they downloaded is an exploit, right? It's malware. So the first step is, like anything else for your business, slow down and make good decisions, right? Don't panic, and don't feel this constant anxiety. Now, are there really common things out there that that emerging businesses need to be aware of? Absolutely. One of probably the biggest thing that emerging businesses need to be aware of are business email compromise. And we all are familiar with this. It's typically known as phishing. That's the most common form of it. But bottom line is it's somebody getting into your email by compromising the accounts and then using it for nefarious purposes. That's probably the biggest thing that smaller businesses need to be concerned about. Certainly, there are other types of attacks, and being aware of the software you're using and whether there are exploits available that somebody might use to get into your data, important. And then just the general sense of, hey, my information is out there. Third parties have my information. How well are those third parties protecting my information? That's probably the second biggest problem, right? Is not that somebody exploited you, but you have vendors or other people that have information about you and your business, and they're not doing what they should do, and they get exploited. This is a very common thing we see, and now increasingly it's known as a third-party attack, where they get information from somebody else that belongs to you, and then they use that against you.
One thing you mentioned was phishing was number one on that list that you had there. What can these small business, emerging business owners do? Is there training out there? Is there a software to block it? What can they do? That's the number one
Yeah,
threat.
all
What do
those
they
things
do?
are true, right? I mean, the first thing that, again, you probably ought to do is you need to get good advice. You need to get somebody who understands this stuff to help you. One thing I've learned through owning my own business over the years, and why I think organizations like NAWBO are so critical, are you don't have to become an expert in everything. You just need to become good at finding people to help you who are experts. NAWBO does a great job of helping their members do that. And this is one of those places where I think that's really important, is find people who can give you good advice about how you deal with this stuff, because frankly, it changes all the time, right? You're never going to find a cybersecurity solution, plug it in place, and never have to worry again. It's constantly evolving and changing. So you need regular good advice on this. But in terms of what a small business can do almost immediately, the simplest, easiest, quickest, and most effective thing that any small business can do to stop phishing, business email compromise, things like that, are to adopt multi-factor authentication wherever possible. And multi-factor authentication means you're not just using a password to access accounts, but you are using a second factor, which might be something as simple as getting texted a code. Most of us have experienced that when we do online banking. That's the least secure way to do it, but it's better than nothing. There are authenticators that you can get on your phone that provide you with a code that you have to put in. There are physical devices that you can use, but turn on multi-factor authentication. If you have an email account, it should use multi-factor authentication. If you have online banking or other business financial accounts, they need to be using multi-factor authentication. If you use social media, make sure you have multi-factor authentication turned on. If you do that consistently and enforce it, this is one of the things that we see businesses do all the time. They say, we're going to do it. And okay, I get it. Having to type a code in every time is an extra step to logging in. Business owners in particular hate doing that. They're busy. They got stuff to do. So they don't want to do that. But they're the person that needs the protection the most. I mean, let's face it, if I'm trying to compromise your business and get at your data and do all these things, I'm not going after the intern, I'm going after the business owner. So great that the intern has multi-factor authentication turned on, but it doesn't do you any good if the business owner doesn't use it. So the business owner needs to use it and everybody needs to have it enforced. But if you do that, 99% plus of
Wow.
business email compromises simply will not work.
Wow.
So you really can stop it cold that way.
Well, that's fantastic. And that's easy. That's
It's very easy.
Very simple, easy piece in that. One thing you mentioned was updating and those types of things. How soon or how often should cybersecurity measures be updated? I think about Wi-Fi passwords and individual passwords and those types of things, but how often should that emerging business owner be doing that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing because we always used to be the advice was every 30, 60, 90 days, something like that, you should change your passwords. And we run into a lot of organizations like that. The truth of the matter is, and the current recommendations from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who publish a cybersecurity framework, is not to change those passwords at all.
Mm-hmm.
That, in fact, what you want to do is you want to use a complex password. You want to use a passphrase, right? Not just a password, but a passphrase.
Mm-hmm.
So a sentence that might be, heck, 20 or 30 characters long, but it's something only you know. It doesn't need to have all the password complexity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going in and making sure that you've, put in uppercase and lowercase and numbers and symbols, not necessarily a thing that you need to worry about as much if you make it long enough.
Mm-hmm.
Make it long enough and then use that passphrase as the means, along with two-factor authentication, and a interesting piece of software known as a password manager. There are a lot of these out there. We use one called Bitwarden, but there are others, Keeper, several others. And by using that software, secured by a good passphrase and multi-factor authentication, you can, for every website or every account that you go to, you can randomly generate a unique password. By doing that, then, even if somebody were to get your credentials for a single website, they don't have your credentials for everything else. So it's not so much a matter of think up a password and change it really frequently. It's more a matter of use random passwords, make them unique for every site, and then leverage the computer to do what the computer is good at, which is to generate those randomly and remember them for you. Yeah. Much more effective than, okay, I got a yellow sticky note and I wrote this password on it and I use the same password on every website, because that way if it gets exploited, right, everything else gets exploited. Change them on everything.
That's great. And I think there's probably several viewers here that have those Post-it notes right now, right? That are it's on their computer, maybe even stuck.
We see them all the time, right? We see them all the time. Or, the person who set their password as password 1 and then they're prompted to change it every 60 days. So the next password is password 2, password 3.
Right.
You see that kind of stuff all the time.
So let's say that, they've done some of these due diligence, but something happens, right? They're getting breached. What is the next step? What is something that emerging business owners should do, or at least have a plan in place, or what are some things they can prepare for?
And that's
almost that insurance.
That's the thing you've hit on right off, Ben, is that the time to think about what to do is not after it happened, right? That's the wrong time. It's too late. You need to have a plan. For a small business, an emerging business in particular, that plan may not be particularly complex, but you need to have a plan. Part of that plan is making sure that you have good data backups. that are secured so that somebody that gets into your infrastructure that breaches your system can't also corrupt the backups. If you've got good backups, it becomes a relatively easy matter to restore that data. And today, with the various cloud services that are out there, it can get pretty easy to create good backups of your data, all right, and secure those. It's much like other disaster recovery, right? Who are the vendors that you need to contact? You need to have a list, you need to have a list of that stuff. You need to know who you should call. You need to inform your customers. And that's the thing that scares a lot of people. But you're better off letting your customers know, hey, this happened. Hey, we're taking steps. And this is how we're going to correct that, than letting it blow up in your face, right? So taking the time to build a plan beforehand and know what you're going to do is critical. Make sure you have a cyber liability insurance policy that is up to date with sufficient coverage, and that you have contact with your insurance company because they have resources to help you respond. You'll want a good consulting firm to work with that knows how to do the kinds of things to restore access, to get the bad guys out of your system and make sure they really are out of your system. You want your attorney. You're going to have to reach out to your attorney because you're going to have to respond to customer inquiries, things like that. So taking some time to sit down before you do this and put together what we call an incident response plan is absolutely critical. Right along with that, you want to do some employee training. First of all, you want to do cyber awareness training so that they know what not to do in order to trigger an event, how not to click on phishing links, how to recognize them, those kinds of things. But then also what to do if there is a business email compromise. Who should they report that to? How quickly should they report that? What should they do with their system when that happens? It does no good to have a business email compromise and the employee doesn't think to tell anybody for a week, right? They need to be able to communicate that immediately and the details of what happened to somebody that can help them out with that. So training and planning.
Perfect. And you brought up that cyber liability insurance. A lot of our business owners don't even think about that, right? I would dare to say some don't even have cyber liability insurance in some ways, or opted out of it, to save some money. I think it's an important piece is that is something to think about is protecting your business. We joked around about leaving the front door open, right, of your business. You wouldn't do that as well. You also would not insure your building, right? If you had that too. It's the same thing with your data, right? On that too.
It's the same thing as any other insurance these days. It's just people look at it, like, oh, this is some new thing, but it's just another risk, right? And so much of what cybersecurity about is risk reduction. You're never going to completely eliminate risk, but it's about risk reduction. And one of the best things that I've seen come out of cyber liability insurance coverage in the last few years is the insurance companies have started to get wise as to what needs to be done to reduce their risk. So when you go to apply for cyber liability insurance, the insurer will present you with a list of things that you need to have done in order to be covered. Now, many of those things are technical or phrased technically, and that sometimes is a challenge for emerging business owners because they don't know what all that stuff means. And again, this is where having somebody to help you can really come in because they can look at your infrastructure, they can look at your systems, and they can tell you, yes, you're doing this, no, you're not doing this. In order to do the thing, you need to put these measures in place, and they can help you address those concerns so that you can get the cyber liability coverage. We've even partnered with some providers who, if a customer is using our cybersecurity stack of tools with us managing them, it significantly reduces their cyber insurance policy premiums by as much as 30 to 50%.
Hmm.
Just because they're using stuff that the insurer has already vetted us for. And that way, if the customer is using our stuff, the insurer knows that that customer is in a good place.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's important to have, but it's also important to save the money by doing the right thing as opposed to having to pay a higher premium.
That's good. And it kind of leads into this a little bit, but we've talked about kind of preparation. We talked about what to do on remediation. We talked about a little bit of insurance here. Overall, what's something we could tell the emerging business owner? What do they need to do to be prepared? And they leave from this webinar, like, what do they need to do to be prepared for 2024? What are some things they could be doing, essentially?
Yeah, well, I mean, as we look at the remainder of 2024 and moving into 2025, a good place to start is look at your cyber liability coverage.
Mm-hmm.
As a business. Do you have it? If you don't have it, reach out to your insurance provider and talk to them about it. They're going to provide you with their list of qualifications. For an emerging business, that list that you get from your insurance provider is actually kind of the cookbook of the stuff you need to do.
There you go. It's a map. It's right there.
Right? It's a map right there.
Yeah.
You don't, they're telling you, they already did the work. Do
Mm-hmm.
these things. Now, you may not know how to do all those things. And if you don't, that's okay. There are people out here who can help you do those things. One of the arguments I used to run into, again, 10, 15 years ago, were small businesses, emerging businesses, medium-sized businesses would say, well, we're just not going to do all this stuff because the cost for fixing it is higher than the cost of a breach would be. So we'll just go ahead and take our chances, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to pay the consulting. We don't want to buy the software. We don't want to do the stuff because that stuff's more expensive than if we actually had an incident, and there's not that many incidents, so we'll be okay. Now, the majority of businesses experience at least a business email compromise of some kind. And the cost per incident on average is running well over $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you start talking about downtime and reputational damage and things like that. So the cost of getting some help in solving these problems is now much lower than the cost would be if you actually did have a breach.
Yeah.
And because there's so many products and so many people now, that's also driven down the cost and made it easier to find somebody. So talk to your insurance agent, find out what you need to do in order to get your policy. If you already have one, make sure you're getting from them. You need to start talking about your renewal about 100 days out before your insurance policy comes up for renewal, because as I said, these things are constantly changing. There's new requirements and you want enough time to implement the stuff, but they're going to give you a roadmap.
Fantastic. That's good. Let's open this up to some questions. I don't know if there's any questions we have out there from the crowd out there. If you do, you actually can unmute your mic. We can also put it in the chat as well.
There's Leanne.
I got lots of questions.
All right, there you go, Leanne.
Oh, well, and I'm sorry to do this because you are my wonderful IT providers, and honestly, I didn't know I needed insurance because I had you guys. So what do I do now?
Yeah, well, that's pretty easy. I mean, first of all, what we want to do is we want to look within NAWBO, because there are NAWBO members who can help you with this. And the insurance for an organization like yours is not going to be hideously burdensome, right? Because it's going to be tied to revenues. You're a nonprofit, things like that. But let's sit down at some point and I'm sure you've got some kind of business insurance provider right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, let's go talk to them. We'll start with them.
Okay, and I did a few years ago, and they gave me a price I couldn't really, as as a small organization, it was like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
everything's online. Do we really need cyber insurance?
Well,
So,
and what's changed a little bit is the pricing. We went through kind of a bad period where those premiums actually went way up. They've kind of come back down a little bit. The other thing that's probably going to help you a lot is because we are working with you,
right.
you are getting a lot of this stuff already, right? We're just doing it, not as a response to what your insurance provider is asking for, but because it's best practice, right? I mean, I know we've talked to you about things like multi-factor authentication and getting that stuff in place. So you're already getting it in place,
Right.
and that'll make this much easier. If it turns out that your current provider, if their policy just doesn't work for you, we have alternatives that we can steer you towards, right? That, like I said, have already pre-vetted us. But in general, right, it's a good thing for you to have. Let's just take a look at it with your current insurance provider and whatever they come back with as their list, because different providers always have a little bit different. Fortunately, they're all based on that cybersecurity framework that I was just mentioning from NIST. So they're all pretty similar. And everything we do is based on that same cybersecurity framework. So
Okay.
you can look at that list and go tick, 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 tick. We're already doing all this stuff.
Okay, good. All right, I'd probably be
And your
reaching out.
premiums will go down, Leanne. See, it'll be
Well,
like,
and that could happen. That honestly could happen.
yes.
Well, yeah, yeah. So, okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem.
Nope.
That's an excellent, that's a really
Great
good
question. We open up for questions as well. And anyone else out there that has some questions, you can unmute your mic or put it in the chat if you don't prefer to speak out. Anything else out there? Any other questions at all?
Actually, one question, Doug. I know that earlier in this webinar, you were talking about reducing the risk, and you had a lot of really good solutions to that, including phishing training and adopting some sort of cyber liability insurance. You mentioned that it's cheaper than $1 million, and I just wanted to know what that usually costs on a regular basis of implementing all of these cybersecurities.
Again, it can vary by the size of the business, right? I mean, we have customers that have hundreds of users and if not thousands of users. And yeah, they're probably paying they're probably paying something in the several tens of thousands of dollars a year for all of their cybersecurity protections, or even more, depending on staffing. But for an emerging business, we have a variety of options that start as inexpensively as around $30 a user a month, that provide quite a bit of that cybersecurity protection. So, I mean, you can do the math on that pretty quickly, right? If you're 10 users at actually it's $29 a user a month for the basics that gets you most of what you would need from your what your cyber liability insurance provider would ask. You're looking at about $300 a month. So it's really pretty affordable and certainly a lot less expensive than trying to recover from a breach.
And spending that could reduce your cyber liability insurance too, right, Doug? I mean,
correct. Yeah.
In some ways, it can pay for itself in some ways, right?
Right. We've designed that program specifically around what we know cyber liability insurance providers are asking, right? We're using the same frameworks, and because of that, we're already doing the stuff they're going to ask for, which, because it's reducing risk for the provider, it reduces premiums.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
Good.
awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Otherwise, we'll start to wrap
Good
things
question,
up
John.
on the webinar. Any other questions there? All
I have a
right.
quick question for the audience.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of heard from Leanne. Other folks, do you currently carry cyber liability insurance? Do you worry about cybersecurity? Do you take steps to address any of this, or is this all kind of new to you and you were not sure what to do? Any comments from anybody? Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, this is all fairly new to me. I have attended some other cyber training just to get an understanding of what I should or should not be doing. But I'll be very honest, at no time did anyone even mention insurance. So that was a definite new key for me to say, wait, maybe I need to go. I mean, it's just myself right now,
Sure.
but things are scary for me with this whole cyber and so this was helpful for me. So learned
Good.
some new information, but definitely did not have a clue. No, at no point did I know about the insurance. So thank you for sharing that.
And as a single provider, you may be, you may be small enough that you don't really need to worry about it quite yet. But it also depends on what your business does, right? If you were engaged in a business where you were handling a lot of confidential information or regulated information for your clients, then yeah, you probably want to look at that, right? Because that's potentially a big exposure for you. But I can tell you as a sole provider, the best thing that you can do, get multi-factor enabled on everything you possibly can, and just be cognizant about if you get email that you don't recognize and it's got links in it, don't click, right? If you do those two things, you're in great shape until you get big enough where you need to worry about cyber liability insurance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
Yeah. Julie, do you have any questions or talk about the cyber liability and those types of things?
Yeah, I was going to answer the question. We have insurance for sure, but I had not been advised before to kind of take a look at that policy, and I haven't for quite some time to see a roadmap because I don't want to out myself, but we've been working on a plan, an incident response plan for quite some time, and yeah, I need to look at the insurance policy to probably finish that work and not overcomplicate it. I think that's what I've been doing is overcomplicate.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, is don't overcomplicate it. These things don't have to be ugly, right? And I think people think there's this, gotta have this 80-page plan and anticipate, and you don't, right? You've got to know some basics, because the reality is most of your response is consistent no matter what the potential cyber breach is.
Okay, I appreciate that. My question would be, while we have your expertise, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today,
Sure.
is around the intersection with AI or generative AI.
Yeah.
We've had some, I guess, for lack of a better term, vendors approach us about our work and incorporating AI and not open AI. I'm learning all the terminology, so
Right.
please bear with me. And I'm trying to learn while being approached and solicited, and I'm concerned. I want to approach it with a risk mindset first. What are my risks here, and then what are our data needs and things along those lines. Do you have any insights to share about this intersection?
That's a
Unleashed
phenomenal,
on small business. By the way,
phenomenal
I feel like it's been
question.
unleashed on us, and we're
Yeah.
having to drink from a fire hose with it. But
Everybody is concerned about this right now, and rightfully so. I mean, the first thing that I'm going to say about AI is what everybody's calling AI today isn't. It's actually not intelligent, right?
yes.
People get all twisted up about that. Generative AI in particular is a tool that can be useful for a lot of businesses, but the biggest concern that you've got from a security perspective about generative AI is employees putting proprietary information into those systems that are public and cloud-based, because they're using that data to learn, right? And so your information then can become exposed. So you don't want to do that. Now, when you contrast that with machine learning, right? And we do a lot of stuff that is in our business that is machine learning. That's more automation oriented. And it's not this open thing where you're just putting in proprietary information into this broad, like public anything. So I suspect a lot of the vendors, particularly based on what you said, are coming to the table with more custom design machine learning. Those don't have really any more security implications or any fewer security implications than other SaaS software. So I'm sure you're using SaaS software in your business.
Mhm.
If you take good care and you use multi-factor authentication, if you start to invest in zero trust network access protocols for accessing that stuff, your security can be very strong around those kinds of things. Just be really careful with the public-facing generative AI like OpenAI that you mentioned. Interesting stuff. You can do some cool stuff with it, but don't put anything in there that you don't want just floating around anywhere.
Right.
Make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Very
Good.
good.
Very
Good
helpful.
stuff. Any other final questions here from anyone at all? We'd love to help you out and guide you and direct you. And it's tough being a business owner. We understand that. It's stressful and daunting. So we're here to help you out on this. And any other questions we have for you? Okay. All right. Well, I tell you what, we'll start wrapping this up here. One thing we did mention today, we did mention about a tech stack that Brightworks has for $29 per month per user. If you're interested in this, it's geared towards an emerging business owner. It will help you on your reduction of your cyber liability. Let us know if you email us at sales@brightworksgroup.net. We'd be happy to set up a meeting with you and kind of go through everything with you and do our best to kind of help you out and provide you kind of that solution that you need there. Otherwise, that's kind of all we had for you today. We want to thank everybody that joined us. And once again, we're going to make sure everyone that registered gets a copy of this webinar. We'll also post on our YouTube account. If you go to brightworksgroup.net and find us online, you can find us on YouTube as well. Otherwise, we want to thank everyone for joining us, and everyone have a successful day as a business owner. We appreciate